Hey guys, tonight we're about to do something a little risky. We're going to step straight into a time when taking a bath was not only a luxury but sometimes a public spectacle. It's going to be humid, a little awkward, and honestly you might not make it through your first week without developing a powerful new relationship with soap. Once you can find any. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, tell me what city you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on the packed dirt floor of a medieval town, and you smell yourself. It's an odd realization, like suddenly being introduced to someone you've lived with forever. Your shirt has been worn for weeks. The collar is a little crunchy. The air is heavy with the scent of smoke and horses and people. It sticks to you the way a wet dog smell sticks to a rug. And here's the thing, you start to wonder, does anyone here actually bathe? In the early Middle Ages, bathing wasn't completely gone, despite the legends. You've probably heard that people in the Dark Ages never washed, but that's not entirely true. Roman baths had collapsed, yes, but the idea of water as a cleansing and almost spiritual act still lingered. Monks, for instance, might bathe a few times a year. That's right, a few times. And that was considered impressive. You, my friend, are now living in a world where a bath could be an event, like a trip to a spa, except with fewer cucumbers and more fleas. And that first encounter with yourself is overwhelming. You try to brush the grime off your sleeves, but it's ground into the weave. Even the air you breathe tastes like smoke and bodies. You notice that your neighbors seem unfazed. They talk, laugh, trade bread without worrying about any of it. Their noses have long given up complaining. There's a reason for that. Cleanliness is relative here. You live in a time when the effort of fetching water from a distant well is part of your daily exercise routine. And fuel for heating it is a treasure. So, unless you're in a monastery or a wealthy home, most people keep it simple. Wipe your face in the morning, rinse your hands if you can spare the water, and hope for the best. But here's something no one tells you, medieval Europeans actually loved the idea of being clean. There are records of people enjoying scented baths when they could, of perfumed soaps imported from the Middle East. And of nobles commissioning special wooden tubs. It's just that most of the time, the practical side of things made those luxuries rare. So you walk down the main road, looking for a place to wash. The sun is low, and shopkeepers are packing up. You see a young boy with a wooden yoke across his shoulders, carrying 2 sloshing buckets of water. It looks exhausting. You follow him and discover a bathhouse. The building is plain, timber framed with a sign carved in the shape of a tub. A queue has formed outside. Inside, the air is warm and smells like wet wood. This is not a private spa, this is a community center with water. There are long wooden benches, tubs the size of barrels. And a big hearth where attendants are heating water in iron kettles. You step inside and suddenly, the sound is overwhelming, people chatting, laughing, even singing. You see an old man soaking while peeling an apple with a knife. You see a young couple sharing a tub, whispering. You see a monk sitting in the corner, eyes closed, clearly trying to ignore the gossip. A bathhouse isn't just for bathing. It's for talking. It's where people meet to exchange news. You think of it as an early version of social media. And just like social media, there are risks. Rumors can spread here faster than a sneeze in winter. Someone mentions that a certain merchant has been cheating on weights. Someone else insists that their cousin's cousin saw a shooting star and it means bad luck. And, in a twist that surprises modern visitors, there's food here. Bread, cheese, a bit of ale. Because why not combine your cleansing with a light dinner? People snack in between plunges, and no one thinks twice about it. The smells are complex. The process of bathing itself is basic. You either get into a tub that's been filled with warm water, warmed, mind you, not boiling. Or you stand while someone pours water over you from a jug. Soap, when you get it, is made of animal fat and lye, rough on the skin. You rub yourself down, rinse off, and for a few precious moments you feel almost new. Do you feel clean? Cleaner, yes. Clean, not really. The water isn't changed for every single person. After a while, you notice the slight gray tint of the bathwater. But you don't complain. In fact, you're grateful. It's rare to feel this light. As the evening continues, you start to pick up little details. Some bathhouses offer herbs in the water, rosemary, thyme, even marjoram. If you close your eyes, you could almost imagine a field somewhere, far away from the noise and the smell. There are even heated stones at the edge of the bath to lean against. People are inventive when comfort is in short supply. And then there's the other side of things, suspicion. Bathhouses, by the late Middle Ages, began to be linked with moral decay. The church officials didn't like that men and women sometimes bathed together. That gossip and flirtation thrived here. There were sermons about the dangers of temptation in these wooden rooms. When the plague came, the fear worsened. Some believed that opening your pores in a bath made you vulnerable to disease. Many bathhouses closed. Others became more strictly regulated. Yet, here and now, at this moment, you're just a weary traveler who desperately needed this. You sink a little deeper, close your eyes, and listen. A young boy is trying to learn a song from a traveling minstrel. Two women are arguing over the price of eggs. The sound of splashing water fills the gaps. For a brief moment, you feel part of this place. When you finally step out, your skin pink and wrinkled, you feel like a different person. You dry yourself with a rough cloth, thin and scratchy, but better than nothing. And step back out into the street. The cool air kisses your face, and the smell of wood smoke comes rushing back. You think about how easy it is to take a shower today, turn a knob, hot water cascades down, scented soaps, soft towels. In the Middle Ages, it's an effort. And maybe, in a strange way, that makes it more special. Every bath feels earned. As you walk back through the narrow streets, the bells of the local church ring. Evening is settling in. You catch sight of a baker locking his door, a dog chasing a child, a woman lighting a candle in her window. Life goes on, clean or not. There is one more thing to note: historians still debate just how clean medieval people were. Some evidence suggests peasants bathed less often than nobles. Others argue that everyone, when given the chance, made use of bathhouses and rivers. Diaries and letters talk about people going to wash on Saturdays before Sunday Mass, which became a kind of routine in some places. But no one knows for certain. So much depends on where you are, how wealthy you are, and whether your town has access to water. Back at your lodging for the night, you notice how your damp clothes stick to you. You lie down on a straw mattress, listening to the soft rustling. The clean feeling won't last long. By morning, the sweat and dust will return. But for now, you close your eyes, grateful for one brief evening of warmth and water. You don't realize it, but this will be the highlight of your week. You wake up the next morning thinking the world will smell just a little better now that you've been to the bathhouse. It doesn't. The moment you step outside, you are hit in the face by the medieval city itself. It's like the air has weight. You take a breath and you taste mud, smoke, something faintly sour, and a mystery note that your nose files under. Absolutely not. If you've ever thought of a medieval town as a picturesque postcard, timbered houses leaning politely over cobblestone streets, flower boxes under windows, well, congratulations, you've found the right visual, but you've missed the smell. The street itself is alive. And by alive, I mean there are things in it that scurry away when you step forward. You start walking carefully. Because here, the road is also a trash can. There is no garbage service. People throw things out of their windows. Sometimes with a polite shout of warning, sometimes not. A cabbage leaf lands a few feet ahead of you. You look up. No one apologizes. And then there's the mud. Except, if we're being honest, it's not just mud. There are horses here, donkeys, dogs. Animals leave, contributions. The rain comes. The mud becomes something much more complex. You step in it anyway, because there's no way around it. That's the medieval street for you. The smell is a character in its own right. It changes with the day. Morning, it's bread from the bakery, smoke from hearths. Midday, it's fish that's been sitting out a little too long, sweat, and manure. By evening, when people toss out the waste from cooking, it's a mix of everything. Your nose becomes numb after a while, and maybe that's the point. It is, however, not a city without rules. Believe it or not, many medieval towns had regulations about waste disposal. There were fines for throwing certain things into the street. People were supposed to dump chamber pots at specific times or into designated channels that ran through the middle of the road. But the rules and the reality, well, let's just say they didn't always meet. In bigger towns like London or Paris, these channels became infamous. They ran with a dark, slow trickle of liquid waste. And yes, you have to jump over them. If you miss, let's not think about it too hard. Every now and then, you pass a man with a cart collecting what we might delicately call night soil. It's used as fertilizer outside the city. There's a good chance he smells worse than anyone else you've met. You give him a wide berth and keep moving. The strange thing is, no one around you looks disgusted. This is just life. Children run through the streets, barefoot. Women carry baskets of vegetables, skirts lifted just enough to avoid dragging through the wet spots. A group of apprentices jostles past you, laughing, carrying planks of wood. The town is noisy, full of clatter and voices, and the smell is just part of the background. At one corner, you see a man selling herbs. Bundles of sage, rosemary, and mint are tied with twine, hanging from his stand. People buy them not just for cooking but to tuck into their sleeves or belts to make the air around them bearable. A little portable nose-saver. You consider buying some yourself. And here's a fun little side fact. People in medieval cities often carried sweet bags, little pouches of fragrant herbs or flowers. It's like a personal air freshener. Some even carried pomanders, small metal balls with holes, filled with perfumed wax or spices, to hold up to their noses. You could think of it as the ancestor of a pocket-sized scented candle. Now, because you're curious, you turn into a side alley. Instantly, the street narrows. It's so tight that two people can barely pass each other. The air is still. There's a puddle in the middle that has definitely been there since the last rainstorm. And you're trying very hard not to think about what's in it. Halfway down, a cat darts past you, chasing something. The houses here are so close that the top floors almost meet, blocking out most of the daylight. It feels like stepping into another world, one that smells even more intimate. Someone has hung laundry between two windows. It drips onto you as you pass. You tell yourself it's just water. This is also the part of town where you notice something interesting. The walls are scratched with marks. And small wooden signs stick out from doorframes. Most people here can't read, so symbols do the talking. A boot might mark a cobbler's home. A jug marks a place that sells ale. And there's one with a comb, promising help with your hair. It's practical in its own way. As you come back out onto the main street, you see a man with a bucket throwing water across the ground. For a brief moment, the air smells fresher. And this brings you to another fact: medieval people did care about cleanliness in their own way. Cities would sometimes hire men to sweep streets. During festivals or big events, people scrubbed their doorsteps. It's just that their version of clean doesn't match yours. The other surprising thing: markets actually had rules about smells. If a butcher's stall was too foul, he could be fined or removed. Same with fishmongers. So, amid the chaos, there's a kind of rough balance. People tolerate a lot, but there is a line. And still, as you stand there, you realize the street is like a living river. Noisy, unpredictable, dirty, but full of life. You adjust your cloak, cover your nose with a bit of cloth like the locals, and keep walking. Because, well, there's no other choice. You're slowly starting to belong here, not because you're clean, but because you've learned to live with the smell. By the time you reach the square, you stop noticing it. The bells ring again, just like last night. And for a moment, you almost feel like the smell, the noise, the dirt, it's all just part of the medieval heartbeat. You think you're ready for medieval life now. After all, you've survived the bathhouse, navigated the streets with your cloak clutched close, and learned to hold your breath just enough not to faint from the smell. But this morning, as you bite into a piece of coarse, sandy bread, something catches your attention, your teeth, or rather, everyone else's teeth. You chew and taste grit. At first you gag, did you break a tooth? Then realize the crunch is from your breakfast. Medieval stone-ground flour left tiny flecks of millstone embedded in the bread. Congratulations, you're using medieval dental abrasion without even trying. Kids here grow up eating bread that doubles as a mild tooth polisher. By adulthood their teeth are worn flat. You, on the other hand, feel like your molars are being transformed into medieval sandpaper. Brush? That soft, bristly tool with mint paste doesn't exist yet. Instead, medieval people rub their teeth with cloth, frayed sticks, or even fingers coated in ash. You spot a young man leaning on a wall, fingering a strip of linen cloth against his molars like he's polishing a tarnished coin. Spit, wipe, go, routine dental hygiene right there. For wealthier folk, apothecaries sell little sachets of tooth powder, ground sage, salt, and even crushed oyster shells or burnt bone. Mixed with vinegar or honey, they tortilla a primitive toothpaste alternative. If you're poor, you improvise with ash, rag, cloth, baking soda-ish substances, or chew a twig until it frays. You spy an aromatic twig someone's chewing, likely from boxwood or rosemary. The scent helps mask bad breath. A good idea, if you can find either twig or breath that smells good. You pick up a twig of rosemary and gently chew it to fray the end. Rub it across your teeth. Sawdusty rough, faintly pine-scented. It's ancient, inspired by Middle Eastern miswak sticks, just localized. You almost feel some centuries-old toothbrush ritual channeling through your jaw. Then there's breath. Mint? Gum? Nope. A medieval mouth breathes medieval air, garlic, stale wine, yesterday's porridge, sweat. When possible, people chew parsley or fennel seeds after meals. Cloves are the status symbol, rare, expensive. If you manage a clove, it's like having a horsepower breath mint. Most chewers settle with parsley or fennel hulls, fine when you're rural, less fine when you're near a dragon-faced pier. At a market tent, you watch a man chew fennel seed while talking. The husk drops, he spits it on the dirt. Around him, the smell is licorice, sweat, wood smoke. He proudly savors it, like someone enjoying a personal air freshener. You're not convinced. If a medieval person gets a toothache, brace yourself. You might be advised to boil sage leaves in wine, gargle warm. Press a roasted onion wedge against the sore tooth. Offer prayers to Saint Apollonia, patron of dentistry, while holding a blessed jawbone. Or, hold a live frog in your mouth until the pain supposedly leaps out, yikes. Historians still debate whether any of these remedies actually reduced pain or simply offered placebo comfort. That kind of uncertainty is classic medieval healthcare. Then there's extraction. In many towns, a tooth drawer peddles services, a pair of iron forceps, a cloth, a bench, and potentially shrieking. No anesthesia. You may watch or turn away, either way, it's public theater. The dentist, if you can call him that, yanks quickly. Blood, scream, relief. Popular entertainment, especially at market day. And a reminder, modern dentists now give antioxidants and nitrous oxide. You appreciate your bedtime brushing even more now. Despite all, people in the Middle Ages do value teeth, even crooked ones. Noblewomen use sage-based pastes, powdered charcoal, or ground charcoal mixed with salt to scrub teeth. The goal? Whiter, healthier-looking teeth. But charcoal leaves black smudges on lips if you're clumsy. You realize, charcoal is still in modern toothpaste today. Unexpected continuity. Peasants take pride in surviving into middle age without losing all their teeth. Missing many before 40. Social handicap. Younger children showing 6 gaps. Cute. Adults? Awkward. This links dental health to status and luck. In a noble hall you observe strict manners. Don't use your knife to pick your teeth. Don't gnaw bones with both hands. If something's stuck, discreetly dab cloth at your mouth. Don't blow your nose into your hand mid-meal. At peasant meals manners are looser, but respect for table etiquette still exists. You notice how people talk around food, not with food. At an apothecary stall you see linen pouches labeled, freshen breath, strengthen gums. Inside, sage, mint sprigs, powdered coral or shells. The merchant offers demonstration, an aromatic vinegary paste. It's gritty and herbal. You buy 1 sachet. For cheap local traders, a small investment in dignity. Children run past you, laughing, half smudged with dirt, half smiling with empty tooth slots. One boy stops, announces proudly he lost a tooth, tucks it in cloth like a trophy. You grin. Missing tooth at age 7 is celebrated. Parents give small coins, the medieval origin of the tooth fairy. Historians remain unsure, evidence is anecdotal, uncertain. This is one of those, historians still debate, things. At twilight, you sit in a smoky common room, chew salty pork, swirl watered ale in a mug. You fray your twig brush again, rub your teeth. It's dusty, piney, vaguely refreshing. Next to you someone recites a nursery rhyme in Latin, another debates whether horses eat better when they gargle with water. Yes, people actually argued over horse hygiene too. Scholars still debate if medieval tooth powders had measurable benefit or were mostly prestige gestures. Papers exist, but effectiveness is unclear. You notice smiles, crooked, gap-toothed, blackened by charcoal, polished flat by grit, but real. People laugh openly. Teeth are visible markers of age and status. They're not flashy, not clean by modern standards, but they tell stories. By the firelight you realize, this world doesn't have modern dental care, but it has ritual, remedies, social attitudes, quirky, earthy, fiercely human. You spit discreetly into the ashes, rub your teeth one final time, gently massage jaw against a toothache that might be coming, thanks for the roasted onion tip, neighbor. You lean back and watch the hall flicker with candlelight and smoky laughter. In this medieval night, your teeth have become symbols, signs of struggle, innovation, compromise, and survival. You close your eyes, imagining tomorrow's bread, maybe less gritty after a few days of milling adjustment. You hope your twig brush will hold up. And you drift off, teeth slightly scratched, jaw slightly sore, but your spirit oddly soothed. And somewhere, far in the future, dentists will invent floss. You envy them. For now, your medieval teeth feel enough. You wake up thinking today might finally be calm. No baths, no gritty bread surprises, no toothaches. But the moment you hear the sound outside your window, a rising, layered chorus of shouts, bells, and the occasional goat, you know exactly where life in a medieval town is going to drag you today, the market square. This is not just a place to buy food. It is the beating heart of the town. It's where everyone goes to see and be seen, where you can buy a handful of onions, hear the latest rumor about the king, watch someone bargain like their life depends on it, and smell, well, everything. You step out into the morning light, following the pull of sound. The streets are already crowded. Women with baskets balanced on their hips, men leading donkeys, children weaving between legs like minnows in a stream. The closer you get to the square, the thicker the air gets with the smell of humanity. You round the corner and stop. The square opens in front of you like a living painting. Rows of stalls made from rough wooden planks and sagging fabric, their cloth canopies in bright dyes that have faded under too much sun. The colors are like patchwork, reds and yellows here, green over there, some so worn they've turned into a color that doesn't even have a name anymore. The stalls line the edges, but the middle of the square. That's chaos. Chickens wander freely, a goose honks indignantly, a pig is squealing like its heart is breaking as a man tries to pull it by a rope. Dogs dart under carts, hoping for dropped scraps. Somewhere nearby a horse snorts, stamping its hoof impatiently. And over it all, the voices. Deep, loud bargaining, the sing-song rhythm of sellers listing their goods, the quick chatter of gossip passed like a secret, and every now and then, the sharp clang of a blacksmith's hammer ringing from the edge of the square. This is the closest you're ever going to get to a medieval shopping mall, but the energy here makes a mall feel like a quiet library. You don't know where to look first because the smells are just as loud as the voices. The square smells like layers. The first layer, bread. Someone somewhere has set up a small oven, and the smell of baking dough floats over the crowd. The second, animals, wool, hay, that sharp sour smell of goats and pigs. The third, fish. And not just one kind of fish. There's fresh fish, dried fish, smoked fish, and the fish that's been lying there just a little bit too long. You breathe in and immediately decide to keep that lavender sachet close. And under all of that is the smell of people. Sweat, wool clothing, tallow candles melted on someone's sleeve from last night, and something faintly herbal when someone brushes past you. A woman selling geese passes you first. She's holding a goose upside down, its wings flapping against her skirt. It honks so loudly you're sure the entire market is looking at you. You freeze. She gives you a nod like this is perfectly normal and moves on. At another corner, a boy not older than 12 is spinning thread from a spindle. His feet are bare, his face serious, his hands moving fast, while his father bargains with a cloth merchant. It hits you that this is work for him, not school. You catch his eye, he gives you a half smile before returning to his spinning, as if to say, this is just life. You start moving from stall to stall. Everything is here. Wool dyed bright red, blue, or green. Wooden spoons with little faces carved into the handles. Pointed shoes so long that the tips bend upward, you learn they're called polanes, and that wealthy young men sometimes tie them to their knees with ribbons so they don't drag in the mud. Iron nails, simple knives, horseshoes. Strings of onions and garlic hanging like decorations. You even see a man selling single sheets of parchment, so clean and smooth that you almost don't want to touch them. Paper is precious. And next to that, a traveling storyteller with a box of wooden puppets. Children are sitting in a half circle on the ground, watching a puppet knight and dragon battle with squeaky wooden swords. The children laugh so hard you can't help but smile. The food section of the market is a sensory overload. The fishmongers line their tables with slabs of fish, their scales shining in the sunlight. Some are fresh, still smelling of the river. Some, not so much. You notice something, women walk past each table and bend low, sniffing the fish before they buy. It's the only way to be sure. And yes, there are rules. Historians note that medieval cities often had laws that fined sellers for rotten fish or meat. But enforcement? Let's just say you still need to trust your own nose. At the butcher's stall, meat hangs in large pieces from wooden hooks. A huge cleaver comes down with a thud, scattering small pieces of fat across the board. The butcher looks at you with a proud grin. You nod politely, and decide that maybe today is not your meat day. And then you find it, a little square of color and perfume amid the mud. The spice stall. Tiny bowls filled with bright powders, yellow saffron, red madder, black peppercorns. People lean over, inhaling the scents with reverence. This is wealth. Spices travel across continents to get here. Pepper, ginger, cinnamon, they cost more than some people make in a month. If you own a pouch of pepper, you guard it like gold. You take a deep breath. For a moment, you forget about the mud. The seller smiles and tells you quietly that a pinch of pepper can make stale meat taste like a feast. You believe him. At the same stall, there's a basket full of small cloth bags. Lavender, rosemary, sometimes even rose petals. People buy them to carry around their necks or on their belts. A medieval portable air freshener. You grab one. You can't believe the relief when you press it to your nose. For just a second, the market smells like a field of flowers. And here's the thing, you realize very quickly that the market sells more than goods. It sells information. You overhear everything. The baker's daughter ran away with a fiddler. The tax collector was found drunk in a ditch. The king's cousin is getting married to someone with more land than sense. This is the medieval news feed. You don't scroll, you stroll. Over by the edge, a man with a fiddle is playing a tune. It's bright and fast, and people tap their feet as they walk. A juggler tosses 3 wooden balls into the air, almost dropping one when a chicken cuts across his path. No one minds. If you want a good day's entertainment, just come here and stand still. The market performs for you. Standing there, you realize something fascinating. Historians still argue about how often these markets happened. Some say a big market day only came once a week. Others insist there were smaller, daily stalls. There are charters, records, but not enough detail to be sure. The truth? Probably a mix. Big markets on set days, small trickles of trade in between. But no matter what, on market day the whole town comes alive. You're about to leave when you notice someone selling chickens. The seller casually mentions that if you really want to show someone you like them, you give them a chicken. It's practical, after all, food, eggs, company. Flowers are for poetry. Here, affection clucks. On impulse, you buy one. The chicken is unimpressed. It glares at you with beady eyes, tucks its head under its wing, and pretends you don't exist. You cradle it in your arms and begin walking back through the crowd, realizing you now officially belong here. The market swirls behind you as you leave, full of life, full of smells, and for the first time, it doesn't feel like chaos. It feels like the town breathing. You come back from the market clutching your very confused chicken, and just when you think you've earned a break, something else hits you. Not with fists, don't worry, but with smell. It's stronger than the market, sharper, heavier. It smells like, well, like you've stepped into a barn, except you're still in the middle of town. And then you notice, it's everywhere. On the streets, in the air, even in the wood of the doors. This, my friend, is the smell of people who do not bathe very often. You know those warm showers you take for granted? The ones where you twist a knob and water flows out like a miracle. Yeah, forget all of that. In this world, bathing is a production. It involves carrying buckets of water from a well, heating it over a fire, pouring it into a wooden tub, and then making sure you don't spill half of it on your floor. Water is heavy. Firewood costs money. And tubs don't fill themselves. So no, you're not bathing every day. In fact, if you are a peasant, you might only manage a full bath a few times a year. Yes. A year. Instead, you wipe yourself down with a wet cloth. Face, hands, a little under the arms, if you're feeling fancy. Clothes carry their own smell, but everyone around you smells the same, so it's normal. If you're lucky enough to be in a town that has a bathhouse, then things change. The bathhouse is part spa, part gossip center, part matchmaking service. You walk in, and the first thing you notice is steam. And sound. There are people laughing, shouting, even singing. You quickly learn that bathhouses in medieval Europe were not just for cleaning. They were social. You might bathe with strangers, with neighbors, sometimes even with your whole family. Men and women in the same room? Sometimes, yes. Sometimes, no. It depends on the place and the century. The tubs here are big wooden barrels, lined up side by side. People sit in them, water up to their chins, their arms resting on the edges as if they're lounging in luxury. They pay a fee, the water is heated in a massive stove, and for a while, they get to feel civilized. And here's the funny part, some towns were so proud of their bathhouses that they advertised them like a hotel would. Hot water. Fresh herbs. It sounds good, doesn't it? Until you realize that the same water might be used for several people before it's changed. You try not to think about that too much. Now, there's a myth that people in the Middle Ages never bathed. That's not exactly true. They did bathe, it just wasn't as frequent as today. We have records of kings bathing weekly, noblewomen bathing before big events, and even monks having set days for washing. Ordinary people. Less frequent, but they did what they could. Some historians argue that in the earlier medieval centuries, bathing was actually quite common. It was only later, after plagues and fears of bad air, that people started avoiding big bathhouses. Others disagree, saying that even when bathhouses were common, peasants didn't always have the time or the money. Either way, there's a clear difference between a bathhouse day and a non-bathhouse day. And today? You are not at a bathhouse. When you do bathe, you might think, at least I get to smell good afterwards. Well, sort of. Soap exists, but not like the floral, foamy bar you're imagining. Medieval soap is made from animal fat and lye. It smells earthy. If you want it to smell nicer, you add herbs. Rosemary, lavender, mint. And no, it doesn't come in cute pastel colors. It comes in dull brown blocks that look like something you'd use to build a wall. Some people just use ashes and sand to scrub themselves. It's rough, but it works. And here's another thing, clean doesn't always mean you are clean. It can also mean your clothes are. People wash their clothes in rivers or tubs, using lye or soap, and then dry them in the sun. The smell of clean linen is almost as good as a bath. In fact, there are people who change into clean linen and feel as if they have bathed. Linen against your skin keeps sweat away and helps protect your outer clothes from smelling too badly. This is why linen is so valuable. As you're standing near a water trough, watching someone scrub a tunic with a stick, you notice a woman washing her hair. She bends over, pours water from a wooden dipper, rubs her hair with her fingers. Shampoo? Nope. Instead, she uses herbs or even just plain water. Sometimes a mixture of soapwort, which foams naturally when you crush it, and warm water. If she's lucky, a bit of rosemary or chamomile for a scent. Then she combs it out with a wooden comb, pulling out more tangles than you thought possible. And yes, that comb is also a lice comb. There is no privacy about that fact. You pretend not to notice. Without daily baths, people find other ways to mask smell. Perfume exists, but again, not like you know it. It's more like scented water, made from herbs or flowers steeped in alcohol or vinegar. Wealthy people sprinkle it on their clothes. Poor people hang little pouches of herbs around their necks, or pin them inside their sleeves. In crowded places, the smell of rosemary or lavender is as much a sign of effort as of wealth. Bathing, or at least looking like you bathe, becomes a social marker. The cleaner you look and smell, the higher your status. Nobles have servants who carry hot water to their rooms. Merchants pay for bathhouses. Peasants manage with rivers and washcloths. And if you're filthy, people assume you're not just poor, but lazy. This is why, even with limited resources, people try. At one point in the afternoon, you find a small wooden tub behind an inn. It's filled with water that looks like it's been used more than once. Next to it, a boy is stirring it with a stick, throwing in handfuls of herbs. You ask what he's doing. He grins and says, warming it for the guests. You peer in. The water is definitely not warm. But you get the feeling that after a day of dust and animal smells, even lukewarm, slightly questionable water might feel like heaven. As you dry your face with a cloth, you think about what you've read back home. Did people really smell terrible all the time? Did they truly avoid water for months? Historians still argue about this. Some point to records of elaborate bathing rituals and scented baths. Others say that the majority of people, especially the poor, simply didn't have the time or means. The truth? Somewhere in between. But one thing is clear, the medieval sense of clean is not the same as yours. It's a world where clean linen and a sprig of herbs in your pocket can be as good as a shower. As the sun sets, you stand in the courtyard of your inn, the smell of wood smoke and herbs around you. You've wiped off as much of the day as you can. Your chicken clucks softly from its corner. And for the first time since you arrived here, you realize that while this place may smell different, it feels alive in its own way. Tomorrow, maybe, you'll try a bathhouse. Or maybe you'll just change your shirt. You wake up the next morning feeling surprisingly fresh. Not because you bathed, let's be honest, the last time water touched you was at the bathhouse yesterday, but because at least you slept indoors. But then you put on the same clothes you wore yesterday. And suddenly, the medieval air doesn't smell so strange anymore. Because now, you realize, some of that smell is you. In this century, your clothes are not just clothes. They are a second skin. And like a second skin, they stay on for a very, very long time. Laundry is a luxury. For peasants, it's seasonal work. For the wealthy, it's a chore for servants that still takes days. Most people wear their clothes until they can't stand the feel of them, not the smell. And if you think, okay, I'll just toss these into the washing machine. Let me remind you, the machine hasn't been invented yet. You have a bucket. You have cold water. You have ashes. Maybe lye if you're fancy. That's it. It isn't laziness. It's logistics. Water is heavy, carrying it takes time and strength. Soap is expensive, animal fat and lye aren't free. Drying space is limited, no clothesline strung across apartments here. Most households own only a few sets of clothes. If you only have one good shirt, washing it means standing around in nothing while it dries. So you keep wearing it. Every single day. Here's the trick, though, linen. Linen is worn close to the body, under everything else. It's smooth, cool, and easier to wash than heavy outer wool. Peasants wash their linen shirts when they can, sometimes in the river. The outer layer, wool, leather, rarely meets soap. If you're rich, you own several linen shifts. You change those more often than your outerwear. That, my friend, is medieval clean. Imagine this. It's spring. The ice has melted. The water is still cold enough to make your fingers ache. Down by the river, there's a line of women with baskets. They're knee-deep in water, beating clothes against flat stones. Every splash sends droplets of icy water across their skirts. Children chase each other along the bank, carrying sticks. The women gossip, sing, complain about their husbands, and sometimes laugh so loud you can hear it from half a mile away. The wet laundry is spread out on bushes, tree branches, or rocks to dry in the sun. The smell of wet wool. It's unforgettable. When they do wash, they use lye. This isn't the sweet-smelling detergent you know. This is wood ash mixed with water, caustic enough to sting your skin. It gets the dirt out, yes. It also makes fabric stiff, and if you're unlucky, holes appear. After rinsing, the clothes are pounded, wrung, and hung up to dry. Most of the time, instead of a full wash, people just scrub spots. A dirty sleeve. Rub it with a damp cloth. A food stain. Ashes and spit, then a quick brush. Done. The smell. That's what herbs and perfume are for. Here's the part that surprises you. In this world, your clothes become your signature scent. People recognize you by the smell of your wool, your leather boots, the faint trace of the smoke from your own hearth. It's like a personal calling card. And yes, when you walk past someone in a narrow alley, they can tell you're a stranger. For the rich, clean clothing is a way to show off. Bright colors, crisp fabric, freshly laundered linen. Servants do the washing, you just enjoy the result. For everyone else, stains are part of life. The only time you see someone spotless is at a wedding, a feast, or church on a very important holy day. Historians actually debate this. Some argue that the medieval world smelled terrible all the time. Others point out that compared to cities in the 18th and 19th centuries, medieval towns were smaller, and natural fabrics absorbed and released smells differently. So did everyone stink? Depends on who you ask. But even medieval writers complained about filthy clothes and unwashed shirts, so it wasn't exactly fragrant. The first time you see a merchant put on a new tunic, you finally get it. The fabric is fresh. It doesn't sag with wear. And for a moment, he looks like a painting come to life. Everyone notices. They comment. Because a new garment is as noticeable as a haircut. You wonder, what do they wear to sleep? The answer, the same thing they wore all day. Taking clothes off to sleep is rare unless it's a very hot summer night. Your clothes keep you warm, and washing bed linen is even harder than washing a shirt. So you just keep them on. Now, here's a less glamorous truth. Clothes that never meet soap. They become home to things that crawl. Which is why, in every corner of town, you see people sitting in the sun, picking at their seams with little knives. They're not mending. They're hunting. Lice, fleas, bedbugs, they all come with the territory. This is also why linen is so valued, you can boil it. In the distance, you hear it. Thump. Splash. Thump. Splash. Laundry day is noisy. Someone is pounding a tunic on a flat stone. Someone else is twisting a sheet so hard that water sprays everywhere. It's exhausting work. And you realize why most people put it off as long as they can. After a day in a medieval market, your shirt smells like smoke, onions, leather, horse sweat, and a hint of roasted nuts. You're basically wearing your itinerary. The only solution? Hang it out in the fresh air overnight. Sun and wind do more for your clothes here than any soap. After several weeks, you give in. You strip off your shirt, scrub it in a bucket until your arms ache, wring it out, and hang it up. You spend the rest of the day half-dressed, shivering in the draft, wondering if you'll ever take clean clothes for granted again. And when the shirt finally dries, it's stiff. It smells like ash. But oh, it's glorious. That night, as you put on the stiff shirt and crawl into bed, you catch yourself smiling. It's the cleanest you've felt in weeks. For once, the smell of smoke and sweat is gone. And you sleep a little easier, knowing that even in this rough, muddy, scratchy world, there are ways to feel just a little bit new again. You've been in this medieval town long enough that your nose has started to develop survival skills. It edits things out. The smell of manure. You barely notice now. The smoky undertone that clings to everything. Almost comforting. But today, as you walk through the streets, something unusual happens. You catch a sudden whiff of sweetness. It's faint, but it's there, herbs, flowers, a hint of spice. And just like that, you realize, people here have their own ways of fighting the stink. Not with showers, but with perfume, herbs, and smoke. First lesson, no one here is trying to eliminate the smell. They're just trying to cover it up. Soap and frequent laundry aren't realistic for most, so the next best thing is to make sure you smell like something other than unwashed wool. Something herbal, something expensive, or at least something different from the neighbors. Perfume in this world isn't the bottled liquid you know. It's a mix of flower petals, herbs, spices, and sometimes even vinegar or wine that's been steeped together for days. If you're rich, you might have oils imported from the East: rose, amber, musk. They're stored in little carved bottles or glazed jars. A drop on your sleeve lasts for hours, especially if the fabric is heavy wool or velvet. You notice that people tend to dab it on their collars, on their hats, or even on a handkerchief so they can bring it to their nose when the smell of the street gets overwhelming. If you can't afford fancy imports, you improvise. People here carry small cloth pouches filled with dried herbs: lavender, rosemary, mint, sage. They tie them to belts or pin them inside their sleeves. When you move, a faint fragrance escapes. It's like a medieval version of a car air freshener, but on your arm. You decide to try one. The local apothecary sells you a pouch stuffed with rosemary and thyme. You hang it from your belt. For the rest of the day, every time you shift, you get a tiny, comforting whiff of green. And then there's smoke. It sounds strange, but smoke is both a cleanser and a perfume. In homes, herbs like sage or juniper are thrown on the fire, not just for the smell but because people believe the smoke is protective. It drives away bad spirits, bad air, and, according to some, disease. You stand in a kitchen while a woman tosses a handful of dried rosemary onto the coals. The room fills with a sharp, sweet scent. Her neighbor swears it keeps the miasma away. You just enjoy the smell and the momentary sense of freshness. And for clothing? Some people deliberately hang their garments above a smoky hearth so the fabric picks up a smoky scent. It's like a wearable campfire. For people who spend a lot of time outside, there's another trick: posies. These are small bunches of flowers and herbs tied together, easy to hold in one hand. You see them pinned to cloaks, carried like tiny bouquets, and sometimes even worn on hats. A posy can be as small as 3 sprigs of rosemary tied with a string. Or, if you're wealthy, it's a mix of roses, violets, marjoram, and cloves, an explosion of scent in a world that rarely smells like this. In crowded markets or during church, people will literally bury their nose in a posy if the smell gets too much. There's a reason these fragrant items are so prized. They're hard to get. Lavender might grow in a garden, but cinnamon, cloves, musk, those come from far away, carried across mountains, deserts, and seas. So when someone wears a scent with imported spices, they're making a statement: I can afford this. You realize that scent here is a class marker. The wealthy smell different. Of all the places you've been, churches have the strongest and most specific scent: incense. You step into a cathedral and are hit with a wave of frankincense and myrrh. The smoke curls up in pale ribbons, catches the sunlight, and fills your lungs. People here associate that smell with holiness and cleanliness. In fact, many believe that breathing incense protects you from the corrupt air outside. So even after a long mass, you walk out of the church smelling just a little bit better than when you came in. On feast days or in a wealthy hall, people go one step further: they perfume the air. Rosewater is sprinkled on floors and furniture. In the corners, bowls of herbs are set out. Sometimes, spices are thrown into the fire just for the smell. The result? For a few hours, the entire room smells festive. You discover a clever trick. When there's no time to wash a shirt, hang it above a smoky fire. The smoke covers the smell of sweat, and as a bonus, insects hate it. Of course, the shirt also ends up smelling like a chimney. But at least it's a fresh chimney. Historians tell us that people in the Middle Ages believed bad smells carried disease. This theory, miasma, explains why they were so obsessed with pleasant scents. Covering up foul odors wasn't just for comfort, they thought it could save their lives. Some scholars argue that the popularity of herbs and perfumes had as much to do with fear of sickness as it did with actual cleanliness. Others think people just hated bad smells as much as we do. So today, you decide to join in. You tuck a small bundle of rosemary in your sleeve. You dab a few drops of rosewater behind your ear. And when you finally walk into a busy tavern, something incredible happens. You smell better than everyone else. A man passing by even says, "You smell like a garden." That's the closest thing to a compliment you've had in weeks. That night, you sit by the fire in your lodgings. The air smells of wood smoke and herbs. You close your eyes, breathe deeply, and realize that in a world without showers, scent becomes something else. It's not just about smelling nice. It's a shield, a comfort, a way to tell people who you are before you even speak. You lie down, the little herb pouch still tied at your belt, and drift off to sleep with the scent of rosemary in your dreams. You wake up to the sound of a bell ringing somewhere in the town, the kind of metallic clang that bounces between stone walls like it's searching for someone who overslept. That someone, unfortunately, is you. Your herb pouch from yesterday still smells faintly of rosemary, but as you rub your eyes and try to stretch out the stiffness in your arms, something else grabs your attention, your hands. Your fingernails are not looking good. And today, for the first time since arriving in this world, you are about to discover that here, clean hands aren't just a matter of health, they're a matter of social survival. You step outside and glance at everyone's hands, and you notice something you never noticed before. Hands in this world speak louder than jewelry. A peasant's hands. Calloused, cracked, fingernails packed with soil. A merchant's. Still calloused, but with trimmed nails and a faint scent of spices or coins. A noblewoman's. Pale, soft, nails carefully shaped, she hasn't lifted a bucket in her life. Before anyone knows your name, before you even say hello, your hands are already introducing you. You hold up your own hands. They tell a confused story, city hands that don't quite belong here. Now, there is one place where washing hands is taken very seriously, the dining table. You wander into a tavern around noon, and before the meal is even served, the innkeeper walks around with a pitcher of water and a bowl. He pours the water over each guest's hands while a boy stands ready with a piece of linen to dry them. There is no soap. The water is usually cold. But the ritual is everything. People watch you wash, and if you skip this step, expect stares, whispers, maybe even someone moving a little farther away from you. Once you sit at the table, you realize how different table manners are here. The table is narrow, just wide enough for trenchers, flat slabs of stale bread that double as plates, and everyone sits shoulder to shoulder. There are no forks yet. You eat with a spoon if there's something soupy, but most of the time you use your fingers. This is why washing before eating matters so much. Bread, meat, cheese, everything is torn with your hands. There's a rhythm to it, take some, pass the rest down the table. If you forget to pass, the person next to you clears their throat very loudly. Clean nails are a sign of respect. No one expects peasants to have perfect nails, but if you show up at a feast with dirt under your fingernails, everyone notices. You see a woman at the market sharpening a small knife, not for food, but to scrape the grit out from under her nails. In the absence of nail clippers, a sharp little blade is the universal tool for trimming and cleaning. If you can afford it, there's even someone in town who acts as a kind of nail groomer, especially for wealthier clients. It's not glamorous, but it's a mark of polish. At wealthier houses, the washing ritual is almost a performance. Picture this. You're invited to a feast. You stand in a hall with long tables and tapestries on the walls. A servant brings you a silver basin filled with warm water scented with rose petals or rosemary. They pour it over your hands while another servant offers a soft cloth. It's as much about showing off the host's resources as it is about cleanliness. And you'd better believe you smell your hands afterward, just a little whiff, just to make sure the scent clings to you. As you eat, you notice something else, people share drinking cups. One cup is passed between 2 or 3 people, and everyone drinks from it. If your hands are filthy, guess what else is going to be filthy? This explains why, in this world, hand-washing is almost ceremonial before a meal. It's like the password that lets you into the social circle. Even in the poorest houses, if you're a guest, the host offers water for your hands. It might be just a bucket in the yard, but the gesture matters. It says, "I respect you enough not to feed you with dirty hands." And refusing that water? That's considered rude. Once the meal is over, here comes another round of hand-washing. A small bowl filled with warm water is passed around, sometimes with a pinch of herbs in it. Everyone dips their fingers, rubs them clean, and wipes on a towel. It's the medieval version of a wet wipe. Later that afternoon, as you watch the townsfolk, you start to notice how much people read into each other's fingernails. A blacksmith's nails are blackened at the tips, but smooth, he's been working metal. A farmer's nails are earthy brown. A merchant's are mostly clean except for a little ink. A scribe's nails, smudged with ink completely. It's like a quick summary of someone's life. On holy days, when everyone gathers at the church, you realize something: people check their hands before stepping inside. You see people wiping their palms on their tunics, rubbing at their nails, making sure they look presentable. Because here, clean hands are a form of respect for God. You manage to get your hands on a bone-handled scraper, a little tool used for cleaning nails. It's smooth, pale, and easy to carry. You sit by the hearth, picking at your nails, feeling suddenly very medieval. It's oddly satisfying. And for a brief moment, you forget that 5 minutes after you finish, they'll be dirty again. Of course, no amount of clean hands matters if you don't know the basic rule. Don't touch things that aren't yours. Once food is set down, you're careful to take only what's in front of you, and you use the outer 3 fingers, never the thumb and little finger, so your grip is delicate and doesn't smudge everything. This, apparently, is good manners. There's a whole rhythm to how people reach across the table without leaning into someone's bowl. It's like choreography. Now, here's the fun part: historians still argue about how clean people really were. Some point to the ritual of handwashing as proof that cleanliness was valued. Others argue that, given the state of the streets, it was all just for show. Was the washing effective? Probably not by modern standards. But it shows that people cared about the idea of clean hands, even when everything else around them was muddy. At supper that evening, you try to do it their way. You stand quietly while the innkeeper pours water over your hands. You dry them on the rough towel, then sit down, careful with your fingers. And as you tear a piece of bread from the trencher, you realize you're starting to feel less like an outsider. It's a small thing, but your clean hands give you a seat at the table. By the time you crawl into bed that night, your nails are full of dirt again. You look at your fingers, shake your head, and sigh. This is just how it is here. You wash, you get dirty, you wash again. But as you drift off to sleep, you can still feel the warm water from earlier, the soft towel, and for a moment, that small piece of civilization makes the roughness of this world seem almost gentle. You wake up to the sound of scratching. Not outside, inside the room. And after a brief, frozen moment of panic, you realize the scratching isn't from a rat in the corner or a thief at the door. It's coming from the bed next to yours. Your neighbor is sitting up on the straw mattress, knees bent, calmly picking through her hair with a small wooden comb. She looks focused. Like a hunter. And you suddenly remember what you've been trying not to think about since the day you got here. Lice. This, you learn very quickly, is how a medieval day begins for a lot of people. Find a spot in the sun, if there's any. Grab a comb, usually wooden or bone, with very fine teeth. Start at the roots. Comb, flick, inspect, repeat. You'd think it's just about looking neat, but no. It's survival. Lice aren't a question of if, they're a question of how many. You never really thought much about combs before. Back home, they're cheap plastic things you lose all the time. But here, a good comb is a prized possession. They're made of wood, horn, or bone. They're carved with patterns, polished smooth, and designed to last a lifetime. Some are so beautiful they're given as wedding gifts. And when you hold one in your hand, it feels heavy, solid, like a tool that knows it's important. You notice that people sometimes share combs, especially in poorer families. There's a certain trust in it. Here, you can use my comb. But you also realize why some people are reluctant. Because when you share a comb, you also share whatever the comb catches. So if someone hesitates when you ask to borrow their comb, don't take it personally. In this world, washing hair with water is a rare event. Water is cold, soap is harsh, and drying takes forever. Most people rely on combing to keep their hair from matting. The natural oils in the hair protect it, and if you keep combing, it stays, let's call it, orderly. When hair does get washed, it's often with an herbal rinse, sometimes rosemary or nettle. It smells earthy, and you almost want to bottle the scent and take it home. You start to notice that hair is almost always tied up. If you're a peasant working in the field, it's for practical reasons. Braids keep hair out of your face. If you're wealthier, covering your hair with a veil or coif, a close-fitting cap, shows modesty and status. There's another reason, too. Hair is easier to protect from lice when it's kept neat and covered. The first time you see it, you almost laugh. Two women sit outside on a bench, one behind the other, carefully parting hair with a knife and picking out nits. They chat while they work, as casual as if they're shelling peas. It's not just for women, either. Men do it too, sometimes in groups. It's social. It's necessary. And for a brief moment, it feels almost peaceful. Lice may be the daily enemy, but fleas are the little opportunists that live in clothing, bedding, even straw mats. You've probably already been bitten a few times. Everyone has. And just like lice, fleas are dealt with by constant inspection. You start to understand why so many people spend time outside in the sunlight, shaking blankets and smacking clothes. One day, you pass a noble woman on the street, and you can tell instantly that she has servants to comb her hair for her. Her braids are smooth and even. There's no matting, no scratching. Her head is covered with a fine veil, not because she's hiding something, but because she can. Meanwhile, the boy sweeping the road. His hair is a wild nest. Even something as simple as time to comb becomes a sign of class. You overhear a strange conversation in the tavern. Apparently, some people believe that cutting your hair too short lets bad spirits in through your scalp. Others think long hair is a shield against cold weather. So, while trimming happens, most people prefer to keep their hair longer, and rely on combing and braiding to manage it. In the market, you notice a strange contradiction. Paintings and tapestries show elaborate styles, curled hair, ribbons, elaborate buns. But when you actually look around, practicality wins. For working women, a simple braid, maybe two. For men, a cropped cut, if they can afford a barber, or just let it grow. For noble women, braids wrapped around the head, covered with a veil. You realize that real-life hair is less glamorous than medieval art. Some scholars believe that the act of combing hair carried symbolic weight. In romances and poetry, a lady combing her hair is a moment of beauty, almost a ritual. Knights talk about receiving a lock of hair from their beloved, not a scarf or a glove. It's a strange thing, in a world where lice are so common, hair is still a symbol of love and purity. Fun fact, archaeologists have found lice combs buried with their owners. Even in death, people wanted to be remembered as someone who took care of their hair. Some combs are so fine-toothed that you can still see the little nicks made by centuries of use. And yes, in some cases, they still find lice eggs stuck in them. Centuries old, but still there. You spend an afternoon sitting outside with a family, and they invite you to join in their nitpicking circle. At first you feel awkward, but soon, the rhythm of it becomes calming. Part hair, inspect, remove, chat. It's slow. It's intimate. It strikes you that in this world, caring for someone's hair is an act of affection. Historians still argue about this. Some claim everyone had lice, all the time, no exceptions. Others think that while lice were common, they weren't necessarily worse than in later centuries. Remember, even in the 19th century, soldiers fought lice in trenches. What we do know, medieval people knew lice existed, hated them, and did their best to control them. And a good comb was their first line of defense. By evening, you've had enough of scratching. You sit down, borrow a comb, and start from the roots. Slowly, carefully, you drag the fine teeth through your hair. It catches. You wince. But when you pull the comb out, there's a strange satisfaction in seeing how much cleaner it looks. When you finish, your scalp tingles. You braid your hair to keep it tidy and pull a cap over it before bed. And as you lie down, you think to yourself. For all its roughness, this little routine makes the world feel manageable again. You have survived fleas, smoky clothes, and the rosemary trick. But tonight, after a bowl of thick stew at the tavern, a stew so heavy you could almost stand a spoon in it, your stomach reminds you of a truth that no amount of medieval charm can hide. Sooner or later, you need to find a place to go. And that is when the real medieval experience begins. Because now, you have to discover how a world without bathrooms manages. You step outside into the crisp night. The air smells like smoke and bread, and, if you pay too much attention, something much less poetic. You look for a sign. You know, like the ones you're used to, neat little icons of men and women on a door. Here. No sign. No door. No building that even remotely looks like a restroom. Just cobblestones, wooden houses leaning over the street like gossiping neighbors, and the occasional chicken. Your stomach makes the next decision for you. As you shuffle down the narrow alley, you start piecing it together. This city works on a make-do basis. If you're rich, a chamber pot under your bed. If you're poor, the alley itself, after dark. If you're traveling, a field, a ditch, or anywhere that feels private. You begin to understand why so many medieval people carried herbs with them. It wasn't just for perfume. The tavern owner, noticing your nervous pacing, finally takes pity on you. Upstairs, he says, handing you a ceramic pot the size of a large bowl. You hold it like it's an alien artifact. It's smooth, surprisingly heavy, and decorated with a painted blue flower. The kind of pot you'd happily plant basil in, if you didn't know what it was for. You climb the creaky stairs, find your small room, and discover why people keep it under the bed. It's all about convenience. No need to stumble through a dark street at midnight. You slide it out, do what you need to do, and then push it back under with a very modern wish. That you will never have to think about it again. At dawn, you're woken by the sound of footsteps. A bleary-eyed servant goes from room to room, collecting full pots. The smell hits you like a history lesson you never wanted. He carries them outside to a corner of the yard, and one by one, they're dumped into a trench. In some places, people just toss the contents straight into the street. Here, at least, they try to keep it contained. It makes you grateful, in a very relative sense. By late morning, the streets begin to come alive. Merchants shout, carts roll past, and somewhere above you, a window creaks open. And then you hear it. The cry. That ancient citywide warning. Guard low. Or in English, watch out for the water. It is not water. You jump back just in time as the contents of someone's chamber pot splash into the gutter where you were just standing. You stand frozen for a full 3 seconds before quietly thanking every god you've ever heard of. After that, you learn 2 rules fast. 1. Hug the center of the road when you walk. 2. Never trust an open window. People are mostly polite enough to yell, but sometimes, they forget. You look up a lot more than you used to. In the countryside, the story is a little different. Most farmhouses have a small wooden shack set back from the main house, usually near the barn. You open the creaky door and find a bench with a round hole in it. Beneath the hole, a pit. The smell is not a surprise. You close the door behind you and understand, instantly, why these things are called the necessary. There's no other word that fits. When you finally visit a castle, you think, surely they have something better. This is where all the innovation must be. You're half right. Castle privies are built into the wall, like little stone closets. You sit on a wooden seat, do your business, and everything falls down a chute that drops, dramatically, into the moat below. Sometimes you can even hear the splash. For a moment, you imagine the poor fish living in that moat. You silently apologize to them. In larger towns, you do occasionally find public latrines. They are wooden sheds built over big pits, with several holes side by side. No partitions. No privacy. It's a community event. You sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers, trying very hard to stare at the floor or the wall. Some people chat. You do not. You come away from the experience with a whole new appreciation for walls. Of course, sometimes there is no pot, no pit, no chute, no shed. Just you and your urgency. In that case, medieval life is very simple. Find a dark corner, make sure no one is looking, and be quick. It explains a lot about why the streets smell the way they do. You knew this was coming. Here are the classics. Straw, cheap and everywhere. Moss, the soft, deluxe version, if you happen to be outdoors. Scraps of cloth, sometimes washed and reused. Snow, cold, but surprisingly clean in winter. Hands and water, in some regions, just rinse at the nearest stream. Toilet paper, as you know, it won't exist for centuries. You look at a fistful of straw and think, this, my friends, is character building. In towns with a river, people sometimes skip all these steps and head straight for the riverbank. One side of the river is for washing clothes. The other, unofficial side, is for everything else. You suddenly feel very, very glad that you've been suspicious of river water from the start. In some wealthier places, houses and inns have cesspits, underground tanks where waste collects. But cesspits need to be emptied. This is done by a gong farmer, one of the least envied professions in history. These brave souls climb down into the pit at night, shovel everything out into barrels, and cart it away. The smell, people say, clings to them for life. No one wants to stand too close to a gong farmer, but everyone is grateful they exist. Where does it all go? Some gets dumped outside the town walls. Some ends up in rivers. Some is actually recycled. Urine, for instance, is collected for use in tanning leather and even in washing clothes. The ammonia acts like bleach. You watch a tanner stirring hides in a vat and decide, once again, that modern laundry detergent is a miracle. You start to notice there's an unspoken rhythm to it all. Early morning, people hurry to dump pots before the streets fill up. Midday, if you have to go, you go in an alley, but be quick. Evening, the privies are busier. Night, the streets belong to whoever can't wait. The city moves to this rhythm, and you move with it. Were the streets really ankle-deep in filth? Some historians say yes. Others point out that medieval cities had strict rules about waste disposal, rules that people didn't always follow, but which show they cared about the issue. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Not spotless. Not as bad as the movies, either. One evening, you find yourself caught out after dark. The inns are full. The gates are closed. And your stomach gives you that unmistakable warning. So you do what everyone else does. You look for a quiet corner. The moonlight turns the cobblestones silver. The whole city feels like it's holding its breath. You crouch, you pray that no one sees you, and in that moment, you feel a sudden, strange connection to every single person in history who's ever been in the same position. It's humbling. And you will never, ever take modern plumbing for granted again. Back at the inn, lying in bed, you stare at the ceiling. You can still hear the faint cry of "guard low," drifting through the window, like a lullaby for a very different age. The night is quiet now. You pull your blanket tight around you and whisper. Tomorrow, I'm buying 2 herb pouches. One for the smell, and one for courage. You wake up to the deep, slow tolling of bells. It is not an alarm clock, it is something much older, something that has shaped how people here live, wash, and even think about being clean. As you rub the sleep from your eyes, you realize that in this medieval world, cleanliness isn't only about the body. It's about the soul. This morning, you're going to discover that to be clean here is almost always a religious act. You shuffle out of your bed, the wooden boards cold under your bare feet, and follow the sound of water splashing. In the courtyard of the inn, there's a line of people at a stone trough. Buckets of water have been pulled from the well. Everyone is quietly rinsing their faces, as if the very first thing you do after waking isn't breathing, it's washing. You scoop up a double handful of icy water and splash your face. It shocks you awake, but there's also something strangely ceremonial about it. The church bell has told you to rise, and now this water tells you you are ready to enter the day. You notice that washing isn't constant here like in your modern world. People don't have endless baths or showers. But when they do wash, it has meaning. Before Mass, a rinse. Before touching a Bible, a rinse. Before entering a sacred space, a rinse. It's like they are saying, I might be dusty, but at least my hands are worthy. And in that, you see the difference between you and them. Washing is preparation, not routine. When the priest gives his morning sermon, you stand in the back and listen. He says, just as water washes the hands, confession washes the soul. You start to realize that here, cleanliness is never just about dirt. A clean face can mean a clean conscience. And if you show up to church unwashed, people think not just about your hygiene, but about your heart. At the entrance to every church, there's a shallow stone bowl, the holy water font. You dip your fingers in, cool droplets sliding down your wrist. You cross yourself. You're supposed to be thinking about blessings, but you can't help also thinking, wow, this actually feels so refreshing. You glance to the side and see a kid do exactly the same thing, splashing a little on his cheeks when no one is looking. You exchange the smallest smile. Some things never change. A few days later, you are invited to visit a Benedictine monastery. The moment you pass through the gates, you realize, this is the cleanest place you have seen since arriving in the Middle Ages. The monks have a lavabo, a kind of large stone sink in the cloister where water runs through a carved channel. It's simple but elegant. Here, washing isn't optional. It's part of their schedule, almost like prayer itself. Before meals, wash hands. After the garden, wash arms, face, and feet. Regular bathing, they actually bathe more often than city folk, sometimes a few times a month in summer, which here is luxurious. You watch a monk scrub his hands with a block of coarse brown soap. What is it made of, you ask? He smiles. Animal fat and ashes. The recipe is older than this monastery. The soap smells smoky, like a fireplace. When you try it, it leaves your hands feeling both dry and strangely smooth, and you can't help thinking of modern soap as a distant descendant of this earthy bar. That afternoon, a group of pilgrims arrive. Their clothes are stiff with dust. Their faces are the color of the road. And the first thing they do? Head straight to the fountain. They wash their feet, splash water up their arms, and even pour a little over their heads. One of them laughs with relief, like this single rinse has lifted miles off his shoulders. You realize that to be able to wash before praying must feel like a kind of rebirth. In the church library, before anyone touches a manuscript, there is a ritual hand wash. It isn't about germs, they don't know about those yet. It's about respect, the book is holy, so you should be clean. You find yourself carefully drying your hands on a linen cloth before holding a gospel. And as you touch the soft, thick pages, you get why they do it. Back in the city, you go to a public bathhouse again. You like it there. People gossip, the water is warm, and you feel human again. But on Sunday, you hear the priest complain about them. Why? Because sometimes bathhouses are notorious for mixed company and temptation. So while the church preaches cleanliness, it also warns against overindulgence. This is one reason why some priests think bathing too often can be spiritually risky. One afternoon, you wait outside the confession booth. When the penitent steps out, she walks to the well, draws water, and splashes her face, as if she just finished running. It looks so natural that you suddenly realize. To confess is to wash, just without water. On Sunday, the whole town looks fresher. People wash their faces, hands, and feet before Mass. Women braid their hair tighter, men scrape their nails clean with knives. Children are marched to the fountain by their mothers for one last rinse. As the bell tolls, the crowd streaming toward the church smells slightly less like sweat and slightly more like soap and herbs. You hear about a holy well a few miles from town, a spring said to cure illness. People come from far away to bathe or drink from it. Even if it doesn't heal, it is clean water, and in this world, that alone is miraculous. Historians today still debate whether these wells helped keep people healthier. What's not debated, clean water, even if it's holy, was safer than most city rivers. But not everyone gets to be clean. When someone commits a grave sin, their punishment sometimes involves dirt. Walking barefoot through the town. Wearing unwashed, torn clothes. Covering themselves in ashes. Their unclean body tells everyone, from a distance, this is a soul in disgrace. And then there are hermits. Unlike the monks, they see washing as vanity. To them, refusing to wash is a way to reject the world. Some saints are even famous for living in filth as proof of their humility. It's a sharp contrast. One group believes washing honors God. The other believes ignoring washing honors God even more. Modern scholars argue over this contradiction. Did the church promote hygiene? Or did it slow down the development of regular bathing? The truth? Probably both. They shaped a culture where cleanliness had spiritual value, but they also feared that luxury baths could tempt people into sin. One evening, just before Vespers, you find yourself at the monastery's fountain. The bell tolls. The setting sun turns the water gold. You dip your hands, scoop, and splash. It's just water. But for a moment, it feels like everything you've been carrying, dust, sweat, worry, runs off your skin and disappears. And when you step into the cool hush of the church, you realize that, for the first time since arriving in this medieval world, you feel almost at home. You push open the creaky wooden door. Inside, the room is cramped and dim, lit by flickering candles whose shadows dance on the stone walls. The air is thick with the smell of dried herbs, musty paper, and something vaguely rotten. Jars line the shelves, some filled with strange powders, some with unidentifiable preserved things floating in murky liquids. The doctor sits behind a wobbly wooden table, surrounded by piles of dusty scrolls. He looks like he might have just stepped out of a wizard's tower. No clean white coats here. Just a long robe and a serious face. Instead of asking what hurts, the doctor starts talking about the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Your health, he says, depends on keeping these humors in perfect balance. Sounds like some kind of ancient chemistry class, right? Too much blood. You get fevers and anger. Too much phlegm. You're sluggish and congested. Black bile means depression, yes, literally. And yellow bile? That's anger and irritability. So your cough or headache isn't just random, it's your humor screaming for attention. The classic treatment? Bloodletting. The doctor grabs a lancet and carefully cuts a vein, or sometimes he uses leeches, those little blood-sucking worms that seem to love medieval medicine a little too much. You feel the prick, then the strange suction as a leech latches on. It's supposed to release excess blood and help your humors balance out again. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Sometimes it just made you dizzy and weaker. Historians today argue whether bloodletting was mostly harmful or occasionally helpful. Your gut says, I'm staying far away from that. Next, the doctor hands you a nasty-smelling potion. It's a mix of honey, crushed garlic, onion, and sometimes powdered earthworms, yes, real earthworms. He tells you it's great for purifying the blood and fighting off evil spirits lurking in your body. You try not to gag while sipping it. At least the honey makes it kind of bearable. Then the doctor pulls out a star chart and starts checking the positions of the planets. He explains that certain treatments must be timed with the moon or planets to work properly. Surgery. Only on lucky days. Taking medicine. Best when Venus is in a friendly sign. You realize your health is not only in the doctor's hands but also in the stars. Now, maybe you don't make it to a doctor, but instead stop by the local herbalist, the village's plant guru. Her house smells like a garden exploded indoors, bundles of dried lavender, rosemary, mint, and some decidedly less friendly stuff like deadly nightshade hanging from the rafters. You watch her pick a sprig of sage, crush it between her fingers, and mutter something about balancing the humors. She mixes it with honey or wine and hands it to you as a cure. Some herbs actually worked. Rosemary could clear your sinuses, sage helped digestion. Others were experimental, to say the least. Remember the public bathhouses? Well, doctors often recommended bathing in warm, herb-infused water as a cure or prevention. They believed warm water opened your pores and flushed out bad humors. But here's the catch, too much bathing was considered dangerous, opening the body to evil spirits or diseases. So you had to time your baths carefully, like a ritual. Imagine trying to plan your bath schedule around superstition and cold water supply. Not every doctor or herbalist is legit. Some are outright quacks or wandering snake oil salesmen, peddling cures that sound great but do nothing or even harm. You hear stories of miracle powders that cause rashes or potions that taste like rotten eggs. Desperate patients sometimes fell for these tricks, and when they got worse, blamed their bad luck, not the medicine. If you're unlucky enough to need surgery, you face a brutal reality. There's no anesthesia or sterilization. Just a sharp knife, maybe a pinch of herb for dulling pain, and a quick, steady hand. You imagine the screams and blood, hoping it's over fast. Surgeons do their best, but without understanding germs, infections after surgery are often fatal. It's a wonder anyone survived at all. You realize that healing isn't just about plants and potions, faith plays a huge role. Monks often tended the sick in monasteries, combining prayer and care. Holy relics were believed to have magical healing powers. People traveled miles just to touch a saint's bone or a blessed cloth, hoping for cures. Sometimes, you think, belief was the best medicine. By the later Middle Ages, universities began teaching medicine using ancient texts from Galen and Hippocrates. Doctors studied humors, anatomy, and philosophy, trying to improve treatments. But medical knowledge was still limited, and many old ideas persisted unquestioned for centuries. Progress was slow. A popular cure for colds was hot wine mixed with spices like cinnamon, cloves, and pepper. It's basically medieval mulled wine, a comforting drink to warm your insides and maybe ease symptoms. You think, hey, that's not too bad, and consider trying it next winter. Modern historians argue, did medieval doctors mostly do harm or help? It's complicated. Some treatments, like herbal remedies and hygiene advice, probably helped. Others, like bloodletting or dangerous surgeries, often harmed patients. Doctors were also healers, counselors, and spiritual guides, roles that mattered even if their medicine missed the mark. You walk out feeling a mix of relief, confusion, and the urge to scrub every inch of your skin. The strange potions, bloodletting, star charts, you're glad you don't live in medieval times. But you also respect how doctors tried their best with what they had. It makes you appreciate modern medicine like never before. You push open the heavy oak doors of a castle, step over the threshold, and instantly feel the air change. The floor is solid stone beneath your boots. The draft here is cool, dry, carrying the smell of beeswax and smoke. At first, your eyes are dazzled by all the richness, tapestries hanging like silent witnesses, bright colors on banners, the shimmer of candlelight flickering over polished metal cups and shields. For a second, you think, ah, this must be what civilization smells like. But then you take another breath. And under all the layers of beeswax and dried herbs, there it is, that stubborn, very human smell. No matter how much wealth there is, people are still people, and soap is still a scarce luxury. In a castle, taking a bath is not something you just decide to do because you're bored. It is a production. The process begins in the kitchen at dawn. Buckets are lowered into a deep well or hauled from a nearby stream. The water has to be boiled, bucket after bucket, over a smoky fire, and then carried, up cold stone staircases, through echoing hallways, to the Lord's private chambers. There, in the middle of a room, a massive wooden tub, shaped like a wine barrel cut in half, is lined with linen so you don't get splinters. When it's finally full, someone announces that the bath is ready. You watch a noblewoman step in, steam rising around her. Servants hover nearby with clean towels, scented oils, and jugs of hotter water. Sometimes they add rose petals or crushed herbs to the bath, sometimes even a splash of wine. There is music, maybe a scream for privacy if she's lucky. But privacy? That's a flexible concept. The simple act of bathing becomes a spectacle involving half a dozen people. And when she's done, everything has to be emptied, wiped down, dried. That's why nobody, no matter how rich, takes a bath every day. This is a seasonal event, not a morning routine. So what about all the days when there's no grand bath? That's where perfume and smoke come in. Early in the morning, nobles reach for rosewater. A small linen cloth is dipped into it and used to wipe the face, the hands, the neck, and sometimes even rubbed through the hair. The sweet smell clings all day long. There's another method that fascinates you, the herb smoke trick. Clothes are hung on a rack above a pot filled with herbs, rosemary, juniper, thyme. The rising smoke coats the fabric, leaving it with a forest-like fragrance. It doesn't remove dirt, but it hides the smell of sweat and damp wool. Think of it as the medieval version of dry cleaning. In a lady's private chamber, you watch a scene repeated every morning. She sits on a stool, and a maid stands behind her, brushing her hair over and over, sometimes 100 strokes or more. The brushing isn't just for neatness, people believe it draws out the bad humors, clears the scalp, and makes the hair healthy. Rose oil and almond oil are worked into the ends to keep it shiny. Teeth? Well, forget your soft bristle toothbrush. Nobles chew on little twigs of sweet-smelling wood, scrape at their teeth with linen cloths, and rub a paste made of powdered sage or charcoal mixed with honey. The aim is to keep breath sweet and the smile white. But there is no dentist in this world. When pain hits, the barber surgeon comes, razor in one hand, pliers in the other. When mealtime arrives, you see the hand-washing ceremony that marks noble life. At the entrance of the great hall stands a basin of water. Servants pour warm water over everyone's fingers while another offers a clean linen cloth. The washing is partly practical, partly a performance. I am civilized enough to arrive at the table with clean hands. And yet, once seated, everyone eats with those same hands. Forks. Rare. Knives are common, but for cutting. Bread, meat, pies, all are touched, shared, and passed around. You look around at the hands, freshly perfumed, but not exactly sterile. When you leave the castle behind, you step into another world. The air changes, it is sharp with the smell of wood smoke, damp straw, manure, and unwashed bodies. The houses here are simple, a single room with a thatched roof, walls patched with mud. Inside, people, children, and animals share the same space. A pig snuffles around under the table. Bathing? Maybe in the river when the weather is warm. In winter, there's no chance. In the morning, a splash of cold water on the face counts as freshened up. Peasant clothing is thick wool, layered, worn until it becomes stiff with dirt and sweat. Soap is expensive, making it requires animal fat and ashes, and if a family is lucky, they might have a small chunk of coarse soap to use once or twice a year. Most of the time, clothes are simply shaken, beaten, or aired out in the wind. Laundry is a back-breaking job done with icy river water, beaten with paddles on rocks. Teeth are rarely cleaned beyond chewing a twig occasionally. Fingernails. Cracked, rough, dark with soil from the fields. Hair. Cut with shears at home or by a neighbor. No scented oils here. Lice are a fact of life, and combing for lice is as normal as combing for tangles. People joke about them, tiny body companions, but no one truly escapes them. You begin to notice something, the smell itself becomes a social barrier. In the castle, there's the faint background of rosewater, scented smoke, and wine. In the village, there's earth, animal, sweat, and wood smoke. And so the nose becomes a class detector. One big difference you notice is white linen shirts. For nobles, clean white linen is worn next to the skin, and those shirts are changed fairly often. There are laundresses whose whole job is to soak, beat, rinse, and hang these garments. For peasants, white linen is a dream. They may own 1 or 2 coarse shirts for an entire year, and washing is infrequent. Standing between castle and village, you realize something profound. Nobility is about appearances. Cleanliness isn't necessarily about actually being cleaner, it's about looking cleaner. Perfumes, ceremonies, clothing, they create the illusion of refinement. A peasant can scrub their face raw in a freezing stream, but without rosewater and embroidered sleeves, no one calls them clean. Even historians argue over whether nobles were truly more hygienic than peasants. On one hand, nobles had more linen, more access to water, and some knowledge of herbal remedies. On the other hand, they had crowded living quarters, close contact with animals, hawks, hounds, horses indoors, and very little actual washing. So was the difference one of smell and ceremony rather than health? The debate is ongoing. As you head back up the hill, toward the looming towers, you take one last deep breath of that cool, perfumed air. And you realize, yes, the rich can hide the dirt better, but they cannot escape it. True cleanliness, the kind that feels fresh and new, belongs to a world with running hot water, with toothbrushes, with showers. That world is still hundreds of years away. Suddenly, the modern, anonymous miracle of stepping into a shower feels like a royal privilege that kings and queens never knew. You leave the calm of the castle's gates behind, stepping out into the chill of open air. For a moment you just enjoy the breeze, and then it hits you, something is different today. The sky looks ordinary, but the village you're heading toward has gone quiet. Too quiet. By the time you're halfway down the hill, you realize you are walking into a world gripped by the plague. You've heard whispers of it before, like ghost stories traded in taverns, a sickness that sweeps through towns, leaving bodies where they fall. You thought maybe it was just one more story. Now the air itself feels thick, heavy with fear. Even before you see anything, you smell it. It's not the usual smell of wood smoke, manure, and cooking porridge. It's sharper, sourer, tinged with rot and fear. People have left piles of burning herbs on doorsteps, hoping that smoke will keep away whatever invisible thing is killing their neighbors. Rosemary, juniper, sage, they all burn together, creating a smoky haze that clings to your clothes. You pull your cloak tighter, breathing through the sleeve, as if that could help. In this moment, dirt itself has become suspicious. Up until now, nobody has been overly concerned with filth, mud was mud, and that was life. But now, as plague spreads, everyone is looking for something to blame. Is it the dirty streets? The foul water? The sin of the people? Or the very air? You watch villagers pour buckets of vinegar and water across the thresholds of their homes. They scrub benches, wash walls, sprinkle strong-smelling herbs in the corners. For the first time in a long while, you can see a desperate hunger for cleanliness, not because they suddenly love hygiene, but because they are terrified. The streets are half empty. Children aren't playing, markets are thin and silent. When someone does step out, they keep a wide distance from everyone else, eyes darting nervously. And then you see a man with a cloth pressed over his mouth, a beak-like mask filled with herbs tied over his face, one of those infamous plague doctors. You watch him hurry past. He doesn't stop to speak. He doesn't dare. In a time without germ theory, people throw everything at the wall to see what sticks. You pass a cottage where a woman ties posies of flowers to the window, the origin of that nursery rhyme, ring a ring o' roses. You see another person fumigating their house by burning sulfur, pine resin, and sometimes even horse dung. Someone else insists on carrying a pomander, a ball of spices, right under their nose at all times. And then there are those who take a different route entirely, they refuse to wash. You might think that during a plague, more people would wash. But oddly enough, some avoid baths entirely. Doctors warn that hot water opens up the pores, allowing the disease to seep inside. So, in fear, many abandon the baths, believing that sealing their skin with layers of dirt will protect them. You imagine living weeks, months, without even a splash of water. Dirt becomes an armor, a shield against death. If the plague has taught you anything, it's that belief and medicine become one and the same here. In the town square, a group of flagellants whip themselves bloody, convinced that sin has caused the disease and that their pain will convince God to forgive everyone. Elsewhere, priests walk in processions, swinging censers of incense. The smoke mixes with the smell of herbs already thick in the air. You hear prayers from every window, whispered, sung, chanted. Some families carry relics of saints. Others make pilgrimages, dangerous journeys, to places they believe might be free of sickness. You realize that faith is the only medicine most people trust. You might think the rich would escape. After all, they can leave the crowded city. And some do flee to their countryside estates. But the plague doesn't respect walls. You've seen the fear in castles, too, the same burning of herbs, the same prayers. In the upper rooms, servants scrub floors with vinegar until their hands crack. Even with the rosewater and perfumed cloths, fear seeps in. You see a doctor writing strange symbols on a door, muttering about miasma, bad air that floats around like an invisible fog. Some doctors bleed their patients, hoping to balance the humors. Others force them to drink vinegar or swallow crushed emeralds, if they can afford it. Does any of this help? Not really. And yet, the townspeople cling to the doctor's words because there's nothing else to do. In the middle of all this, rumors swirl. Some say it comes from dirty air rising from rotting waste. Others believe it's a punishment from God, or the alignment of planets, or poisoned wells. The poisoned wells idea causes a wave of violent scapegoating, leading to tragedy that history never forgets. And there are those who simply shrug and say, no one knows. Historians still argue today about what the average medieval person believed, because it changed from town to town, and year to year, as fears shaped their logic. It's strange, isn't it? The plague makes dirt both the enemy and the shield. On one hand, people think filth causes sickness. They clean, burn, scrub, sprinkle herbs. On the other, they fear that cleaning, especially with water, makes them vulnerable, so they stop washing their bodies. You watch as a woman carefully scrubs her front door while wearing the same clothes she's been in for weeks. By now, the town looks like it's holding its breath. Markets are smaller. Taverns are closed. Churches are crowded at odd hours with the desperate. You pass a row of houses with crosses painted on the doors. Families inside are trapped, waiting, hoping. And over it all is the smell, the burnt herbs, the vinegar, the stale fear. You wonder, does living in the countryside help? Sometimes, yes. Villages spread out mean less contact, fewer people breathing the same air. But trade routes bring danger. A single peddler, a single cart, a single wind gust from the city can bring sickness into even the most remote places. You understand now why travelers are eyed with suspicion. You watch a group of merchants hastily loading their carts, hoping to escape before the roads are closed. Others flee into the woods, setting up camps to avoid the crowded towns. The countryside begins to fill with wandering bands of refugees, exhausted, frightened, and sometimes carrying the very thing they are trying to outrun. The fear is so great that normal life grinds to a halt. Harvests are left undone. Fields grow wild. Children are no longer taught. Goods are no longer made. It's like someone pressed pause on an entire society. You realize the plague doesn't just kill bodies. It paralyzes everything. Years later, when the sickness finally recedes, the memory stays. People remember the smell of the smoke. They remember how they watched neighbors fall sick overnight. They remember the look in a friend's eyes before they vanished behind a painted cross on the door. And for a long time after, dirt is never quite just dirt again. Even today, scholars debate just how much people understood about dirt and disease during the plague. Some say the panic triggered one of the first real attempts at sanitation, removing trash, isolating the sick, improving urban hygiene. Others argue that it was more superstition than science, that fear made people clean, but without understanding why, their efforts were random. When you finally leave the silent, smoky streets, you carry the smell with you. The wind on the hillside smells like freedom again, but you still taste ashes on your tongue. And as you walk back toward the hills and the castle beyond, you realize that nothing, not even wealth, can guarantee safety in this world. The road feels long, and the wind feels cold. You keep walking, one cautious step at a time, grateful that this is a journey you can leave at any moment, simply by opening your eyes. The road you follow finally opens up into a new kind of morning. The fields you pass no longer smell like fear. There is still mud, of course, there will always be mud in this age, but the air seems lighter now, as if the world itself is trying to shake off the heaviness of the plague years. You find yourself at the edge of a small town that feels different from all the others you've walked through so far. And in this town, you begin to see signs that something new is stirring, a slow awakening into a cleaner age. The first thing you notice is the sound of running water. In the center of the square, there's a newly built fountain. Clear water spills from a carved stone spout into a trough, and for the first time in a long time, you see children laughing as they splash their hands in it. It's not perfect, this is no modern plumbing. The fountain is fed by an aqueduct that someone has spent years repairing. But it's free-flowing and public. People come here with buckets to draw drinking water, instead of scooping muddy liquid from a ditch. And while no one has the word sanitation yet, they are learning, if the water flows, it is safer. This is your first clue that the world is changing. You walk farther into town and hear chatter spilling out from a tall wooden building with steam drifting out of the roof. A public bathhouse. Once upon a time, before the plague, bathhouses had been a social hub. Then fear and superstition shut them down, claiming baths spread disease. Now, with the worst behind them, people are daring to come back. Inside, you see a room full of tubs, men and women in separate areas, laughing, gossiping, scrubbing. The air is warm and smells faintly of soap made with lye and herbs. You dip a finger into the water, surprised to find it warm. Someone has gone to the trouble of building a furnace below the wooden floor. For a brief moment, you feel a twinge of modern luxury here, this sense that cleanliness is beginning to matter again, not just for appearances, but for health. Do you know what smells different here? Soap. Not the harsh, gray lumps peasants used to make in secret, but bars of better quality, smoother, scented with lavender or sage. After the plague, more towns began trading soap as a valuable commodity. In places like Castile and Marseille, whole workshops appear, experimenting with pure olive oil and ashes to create soap that lathers better, rinses cleaner. It's not cheap. But it's available. And people are slowly, cautiously learning how to use it, on clothes, on hands, sometimes even on their bodies. There's a sense that knowledge is starting to move faster now. You overhear talk of books, of ideas traveling from city to city, ancient Roman texts rediscovered, Arab medicine translated into Latin, new thoughts on health and balance. You can almost feel the ground shifting as curiosity reawakens after centuries of survival and superstition. Someone, somewhere, begins to write down that air, water, and waste must be managed. That filth isn't just ugly, it can make people sick. The streets still have their earthy tang, but they don't hit you like a wall anymore. You see buckets of waste being carted away instead of simply dumped. You see straw scattered on the street to soak up mess. And though no one calls it urban planning, the townsfolk know now, cleaning the streets makes a difference. In a wealthier part of town, you see a merchant's wife proudly hanging white linen shirts on a rope outside her house. The plague years taught everyone a hard lesson: dirty, unchanged clothes seem to breed sickness. Now, even families of modest means try to wash their linens more often. The bright whiteness of a clean shirt becomes a badge of pride, a visible way to say, "I care about health." You pass a barber surgeon at work. Before, this person's tools were razors and leeches. Now, you notice something new on the table: small scissors, combs, and even a bowl of warm water for washing before tending to wounds. They may not yet understand germs, but they've seen enough death to know that a clean wound heals better than a dirty one. It's the tiniest step, but it is a step. You wander through a small apothecary. Inside, jars of dried plants line the walls: rosemary, sage, lavender, chamomile. These herbs are still used, but now they sit beside manuscripts and diagrams. You watch the apothecary measure ingredients, not just guessing, but weighing, writing notes. Healing is still part superstition, but it's becoming a craft, a skill, less about luck, more about learning. In the harbor town beyond, ships are unloading exotic goods: cinnamon, cloves, citrus fruits. You realize that as Europe begins to heal, trade routes bring not just wealth, but also new ideas about cleanliness and health. In southern ports, olive oil soap becomes a prized good. In northern cities, merchants adopt perfumes and distilled rosewater from the Middle East. This cross-pollination of habits slowly changes how people think about daily hygiene. You start to see paintings in churches showing not only saints, but everyday life, clean and bright. Artists begin to imagine what the world could look like if it was more ordered, more beautiful. This new love for harmony spills out of the arts into real life. People plant gardens not just for food, but for the scent. They decorate fountains. They build public squares with clean stone surfaces. It happens so slowly that you almost don't notice it at first. But there is a new scent in the air. It's faint, like a whisper: soap, flowers, clean linen, citrus oils. The heavy, oppressive stench that once clung to every street corner doesn't vanish entirely, but it no longer wins. You overhear the town officials posting new laws. No dumping waste directly in the main street. Night soil to be carried outside the walls. No slaughtering animals inside the city gates. Of course, not everyone listens. But the idea that cleanliness is linked to safety has finally begun to root itself in law. The longer you stay, the more you notice how these small changes affect people's lives. Children can play in courtyards without stepping in as much filth. Merchants wash their hands before handling goods. Bathhouses hum with laughter instead of silence. You see people caring for their clothes, for their tools, for their streets. It's not just survival anymore. It's a subtle shift toward dignity. You notice even the church has changed its tone. Priests still preach about purity of the soul, but they also promote physical cleanliness as a form of respect for God's creation. In monasteries, the daily rhythm of washing hands, laundering linen, bathing regularly begins to spread outward as an example for others. And slowly, generation by generation, the understanding grows: disease is not magic. There are forces at work: air, water, waste, that can be influenced by human hands. The Renaissance hasn't fully arrived yet, but you can feel it coming. You are standing in the faint glow of a dawn. You stop for a moment and think back on everywhere your steps have taken you. The muddy streets filled with stench. The castles with their rosewater and scented smoke. The villages during the plague, with their burning herbs and desperate prayers. And now here, in this slightly cleaner town, with its flowing fountain, its soaps, its open windows, and its cautious hope. You can almost imagine what might come in the next few centuries. Running water in every home. Soap in every hand. Clean bed sheets, washed teeth, brushed hair. But for now, these are just tiny beginnings, and that's enough. As you prepare to leave this town, you draw in a deep breath. For the first time on this long, strange journey through medieval life, the air doesn't make you wrinkle your nose. It smells like the beginning of something new. The road you have been walking slowly fades into a softer and softer twilight, like a candle that has been burning all evening and is finally ready to rest. You notice that even your steps sound quieter now. The world you have just crossed, the muddy alleys, the bustling castles, the terrible plague towns, the curious bathhouses, all of that seems to be slipping away behind you, as though the weight of centuries is finally being lifted from your shoulders. For a long moment, you stand perfectly still and let the cool air brush across your face. You can hear a fountain somewhere close by, the same one you saw in the square, and the sound of falling water feels like a soft, patient rhythm, almost like breathing. It is not a grand fountain, just a simple stone trough with clear water flowing, but tonight it sounds like music. You take a slow, deep breath. It tastes different here, doesn't it? No ash, no vinegar, no sharp sting of burning herbs. Instead, there's a faint trace of wet stone, and far away the faintest hint of rosemary from a window where someone has hung herbs to dry. The air feels light. The kind of air that lets you unclench a little, that makes your shoulders drop without you noticing. And as you stand there, you realize, this journey has been a long one. You've walked beside peasants carrying water, you've sat quietly in castles full of perfume, you've crouched in smoky plague streets, and you've seen how people, in every corner of the Middle Ages, struggled with something as simple as keeping clean. For them, clean was never just a word. It was survival. It was dignity. It was a hope that tomorrow might be a little kinder than today. Now, in the dim light of this quieter town, you can finally set those images down. They will still be there in the morning, but for now they are like books you can close. You start to walk again, slower this time, your footsteps soft against the packed earth. Past the fountain, the street begins to narrow. A single lantern sways gently on an iron hook, its light painting golden rings on the cobblestones. On one side, a bakery has already closed for the night, but the scent of bread lingers in the doorway, warm and comforting. On the other side, someone hums softly as they sweep their stoop, their brooms scratching faintly in the quiet. There is no rush. You follow this little street as it curves away from the square, and with every step the world gets softer, dimmer. You notice the houses now, the windows shuttered, the smoke from the chimneys already thinning as people settle in for the night. For the first time in a long time, there are no crowds, no shouting, no fear. Just rest. At the very end of the lane, you see a wooden door standing slightly open. Warm light spills out, and a voice welcomes you in, as if they have been expecting you all along. You step inside, and the world becomes smaller and safer. The inn is quiet. The wooden floor is swept clean, the beams overhead are dark and sturdy, and the air carries that unmistakable smell of fresh straw and warm wool blankets. A low fire burns in the hearth, throwing a steady glow over the room. The innkeeper points you toward a little bed in the corner, a bed already made up with linen sheets, white as morning light, and a thick blanket folded back just for you. You sit on the edge for a moment, letting yourself just be still, and then you ease yourself down, lying on your back. The pillow cradles your head, soft, almost weightless. Your shoes are kicked off, your cloak pulled loosely over you, and for the first time since this long journey began, you feel safe. Close your eyes for a moment. Listen. The fire pops quietly in the hearth. Somewhere outside, an owl calls from the dark trees beyond the walls. The fountain's steady trickle is still faintly there, a heartbeat far away. All the noise of the world, the chatter, the smell of unwashed streets, the fear of plague, the rustle of long gowns and the clatter of wooden clogs, has faded to nothing. What remains is just this, the calm of a quiet room, a gentle breeze through the window, and the sense that you've walked through 100 years of history only to end up somewhere deeply still. The people you've met tonight, the sights you've seen, they stay with you. The peasants washing in cold streams, the lords perfuming their halls, the children holding their noses as they pass the town ditch. All of them, in their own ways, trying to live as best they could. And isn't that the most human thing? To try. Even in mud. Even in fear. To try to make things better. That's what the Middle Ages were, at their heart. Not a dirty, hopeless time, but a long, uneven, and sometimes messy effort to hold on to life, to health, to dignity, with whatever tools they had. Now it's your turn to rest. The room is warm. The pillow is soft. Your eyes are heavier with every breath. In the safe glow of this medieval inn, the night stretches out like a road you no longer need to walk. Let all the details drift away, the smell of herbs, the feel of cold fountains, the smoke of burning juniper. Let them become gentle clouds in a dream, floating just out of reach. With the faint sound of the fountain outside, and the last light of the lantern dimming, the whole town sleeps. And so do you. Sleep well, traveler.